Williams, and once again, we're joined by co-host David Walls, director of the Family Foundation here in Kentucky. But we also have a very special guest and a friend of both of ours this week, Representative Matt Lockett. He's actually Matt from my district and a good friend. And by the way, before I let you guys go at it, congratulations on your engagement.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, David. Thank you as well for co-hosting.
Greg, good to be with you, and Representative Lockett, so thankful that you were able to join us. I know the legislative session recently ended. Hopefully
Yes.
you've been able to catch your breath a
Rest
little
and
bit.
relax a little bit, yes. Yeah.
So it was the end of the 60-day long session, passed a budget, a lot of flurry of activity. Greg and I have talked a little bit in the last few episodes that we recorded leading up to the sessions, but one of the important bills that they got across the finish line for pro-family conservatives that we were talking about was your bill, House Bill 278. We focused a lot on an amendment that was added to that bill that would protect kids from online pornography. But I want to take just a minute to say thank you for your leadership on that issue, but to also give you an opportunity to talk about the underlying bill and some of the protections that were in place on that bill and why it was so necessary for that bill to pass.
Yeah, so we started on House Bill 278 back last year. I was approached by the Attorney General's office and some others as well about some different protections for children that they were seeking. And so that's how the bill started. Every time that we met, we added something else to it because a different topic would come up, and it became a very large bill in terms of our goal was to protect kids in abusive situations. Yeah. And so a lot of the bill increases penalties on child abuse and child sexual assault. Part of the bill is as well prohibits superintendents from hiring anybody that has a past with that, and several other things too that the bill did. But yeah, it kind of morphed into something very big that I was very proud of.
Yeah, I remember, it's funny how these things work. I remember I was in your office for a meeting on another topic,
Yeah.
I think maybe before the session even had started, and got to sit in on a meeting that you were having on this topic. So an important underlying bill, your bill had passed the House and had gone over to the Senate, and as sometimes things start getting quite chaotic at the end of the session, there was a deep desire to pass a bill to protect children from online pornography that a number of states had done, and really the only opportunity that was left was to add to your bill an amendment for those online protections. And I just want to acknowledge this publicly, because anytime you take an amendment that's an entire other bill and put it on a bill, even if both of those issues as standalone issues are pretty straightforward, it can complicate the process. Yeah.
Oh, but it didn't cause you any trouble, did it? No,
not at all.
Just want to make sure.
But it takes someone that was willing to put in the work and to ensure that these things happen. And so I just want to thank you again for doing that. So what ended up happening, as we previously discussed, is an amendment was added in the Senate and ended up passing. The governor's actually already signed it into law.
Yes.
So that portion of the bill is law. It doesn't go into effect till later this year. But as you talked and did such a good job discussing on the House floor, these online protections have already been upheld in some states, and it has been leading to some states actually seeing some of the largest pornographic websites shutting down because they don't want to follow the law to simply require that people that come on those sites are age verified.
That's right. And I think it's important too. Of course, the whole concept was to protect children from this content. But what I've seen as well is that since this has passed, I've actually had adult males come to me and have said, this is going to help me as well, because if I have to put in my driver's license or some type of verification, I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so they have come and said, it's kind of a roundabout thank you, but I think this will actually end up going further than just protecting kids
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Well, and David, you and I talked about, it's interesting. You said it continued to morph and get larger and larger, which should say something to us as a culture as to what we're doing to kids.
Mm-hmm.
That we've got to have more and more laws, bigger and bigger. So thank you again. I echo David's thanks you to you.
Well,
for
the bad
doing
part
that.
about it is that we, as a culture, we have people that want to begin early with our children, with
Yes.
indoctrination,
Yeah.
with
Yes.
with things like pornography and access to pornography and other issues as well.
Yes.
But when
Right.
when we understand that this starts at such a young age,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes even unbeknownst to parents, unbeknownst to the children, the
Even
first
by
time
design,
themselves.
Matt. Even by
Correct.
design, it's not known to
Correct.
parents. We've
And
talked
so
about,
I always shudder to think that the state has to step in
Yeah.
as a protection
Yeah.
mode, but in this case, we
Yeah,
do.
thank you. Yeah, you
Yeah.
did. And I tell you, what we've also found out with the brain research is the earlier you get them, the harder it is to turn them back around. There's
Correct.
a scripture verse that says, train them in the way they should go.
Yeah.
And when they're old. That doesn't, obviously in scripture it's saying train them in the way of the Lord. But if you train them in another way, it's going to be hard to turn
Same
that
thing.
ship around.
Correct.
Because that's the way God designed it. So thanks again. Leads us into the next thing we wanted to ask. David, I know you and I talked about this. One of the missed opportunities was the DEI bill.
Yeah.
Would you share with them a little bit more? I know David and I have talked a little bit
Yeah.
about from your perspective
Yeah,
what you can.
I was disappointed to see that we walked out of session without any type of protections
Yeah.
against
Same type of
that.
thing, right?
Yes.
Indoctrination early on.
Correct. And so what happened there? The House passed a version, the Senate passed a version, and in the end, the last hours, those two could not come together, and so it ended up being a very big missed opportunity, and so we walked out, ended session without any bill that dealt with it.
Where do you think? I've asked David before because obviously you're there. David's there a lot. Where do you think that will go? Is that something you think they will pick
I
up
think
and
it'll
try and
come
make
back.
happen?
Yeah, I
Good,
think it'll
good.
come back, and what that looks like, I don't know. The difference, I think, the House version was a lot more robust. The Senate version was a lot more kind of pared down,
Yeah.
and so my guess would be it's going to have to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good deal.
And just to remind our listeners, DEI, because that term
Diversity,
has
equity,
become,
inclusion, yes.
Yeah.
But the issue
on
is
college
yes,
campuses. And I was
that's
just
the big
going to
one.
say,
Yeah.
not to get into what all's been going on, but boy, have we seen
Yes.
what's going on our college campuses and how some of these radical ideologies, as they're allowed to play out, are
The ugly
impacting-
side of
yeah.
it.
Yes.
It has gotten
Yeah.
ugly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of that's the foundation of a lot of it.
Yeah.
Really is. So we need to do something about that. David, one of your things that you were so excited about, I know we wanted to ask Matt, the Amendment 2.
Yeah, so
Hopefully.
a proposed school choice constitutional amendment that the legislature passed, and so we talked a little bit about that. That was, it feels like a lifetime ago.
It
That was
does,
a
yeah.
little early. It wasn't early in the session, maybe about midway through the
Yeah.
session. So both chambers requires a constitutional majority, 60%. They passed a proposed educational freedom amendment, but want to let Representative Lockett, who's a supporter of school choice, but there's going to be a lot of misinformation,
There
already
is.
has been, about what this constitutional amendment is, what it does, and what it doesn't do. I'd love to have you just share a little bit.
Yeah, so I think it's important because it gives the voters a voice. We hear all the time, well, you guys did this, you guys passed this, you guys do this and that. And in our pushback off of this bill, that was the pushback, was to say you're instituting school choice, you are sending tax dollars to private schools. And that's just not true for
Yeah.
this particular bill. What this bill does is it says we as the General Assembly believe this is such an important issue that we want the voters to decide if we send public dollars into private schools or public charter schools, whatever the case might be, but that gives us the opportunity to say we can send dollars, quote, outside of the common school system. And that's all it does. It doesn't make any type of policy decisions. It doesn't say only Christian schools get it, only secular school. It just says, voters, we want you to decide, is this something that we want in Kentucky?
Essentially, do we want Kentucky to have every option on the table in terms of empowering parents
Yeah.
to be able to have resources to educate their kids? You know, it's interesting, Matt. In the last, I think, few weeks, the continued explosion on the school choice has been sweeping the nation. I think Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, a number of states are passing various school choice programs, and it would, Kentucky's really going to be left. I mean, it's already all of our neighbors have some version of a school choice program. Kentucky's really going to be left behind. The kids and families and students of Kentucky.
Yeah, because the research shows that when you do
Yeah.
this, we've talked about it several times. Rising tide raises all ships. All of the children benefit.
Right.
All of them do.
Yeah, and the studies have shown in the states that have implemented, it's actually improves the public school system
Yes,
as well.
all of
And,
it.
and so, really, this is about just saying we want all of the above options available on the table, but it's going to be up to voters. It's going to be up to voters in November.
And that's the bottom line. I
Yeah.
think the bottom line is to say that we as a Commonwealth, we as a state,
Yeah.
our goal is to educate our children.
Right.
We want the best education possible. We know that a huge majority of people are still going to choose public schools, and that's great.
Yeah.
But there ought to be that option to say, this school doesn't, possibly do what I want it to do, or this, whatever.
Yeah.
But we have to focus on education, not on indoctrination, not on saying but
Not on
educating
control.
our kids.
Not
That's
on
the bottom
control,
line.
right? Well, and the interesting thing is you're doing two things. I think there this amendment does. It gives Kentuckians a voice,
Yeah.
and it places it back in the hands of parents,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we ought to be doing. Schools ought to be helping support that,
Yeah.
not work against that, as you kind of alluded to.
And we've got to
earlier,
be
like
very clear
indoctrination.
too in the next several months. We've got to stay vigilant because there's going to be a ton of out-of-state dollars pour in
Yeah.
to defeat this. Teachers unions, public schools don't want this, and so we've got to stand firm. Not only stand firm, but also fight against all of the misinformation
Right.
Yep.
that is going
Exactly
to come about
right.
around this.
And David and I've reminded David, he's in agreement. I don't say it because he's not. It's not Kentucky's dollars.
That's right.
It's my dollars and your
It's our
dollars and
tax
David's.
dollars.
It's our tax dollars, so we ought to have a voice in it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way government works best.
That's right.
And we should have. So, but speaking of that, David, primary's coming up. Matt, I know you're going to have a tough race, right?
I don't have a primary. Thankfully,
Good. Yeah.
thankfully,
We
no
are
primary
too. We
for
are
me.
too. We are
Yes.
too.
Yeah, but we are in primary election season, and we encourage folks to get equipped. There are some important races, and so if you go to votekentucky.us, as we mentioned before, we partner with the Christian voter guide company iVoter Guide. Great folks, and we've got resources available on any of the contested primary races, and so encourage folks to go to that website and make sure you get equipped to get out and vote. In a lot of primary races, the primary is primary. In a lot of districts, what happens in the primary is really it's almost foreordained
right.
what could happen in November. So certainly we'll be publishing a voter guide for the November general election as well. But encourage folks to get equipped and to be salt and light with who you vote for.
KentuckyFamily.org. That's David. loveandlordship.com. How can they contact you, Matt, if they have questions?
They can always email me at matt.lockett@lrc.ky.gov. It's a long
Okay.
address.
Yeah,
That's
you
the way
can go back and listen to it again. Thank you
Yeah.
for joining us. Thanks for
Thank
your
you.
prayers. Thanks always to the Lord. Make it a great day, and God bless in the love and
God bless
worship
you.
of Christ. Stay tuned for my good friend Greg Horn at 1245, and Hope is here. I'm Greg Williams with Matt Lockett and David Walls. You're listening